Hi, I'm Jeff Stark. Thanks for being with me today. This is the seventh of a series of videos that we are titling, Why Am I the Only One Apologizing? And we're talking about in these videos a husband and wife who, very early one morning, getting ready for work, entered into a very serious and argumentative quarrel. It got heated. Things were said that were unkind and unfriendly and unloving. The husband and wife were acting unlovingly toward one another as well, acting in that way. They went their separate ways. That night, as described in video number one, the husband came home and apologized for the way that he had behaved, the things that he had said, and said he was very sorry about that, and asked his wife to forgive him. His wife said she accepted his apology and granted him forgiveness for those ways that he had acted and things that he had said. The husband was waiting for the wife to reciprocate because she certainly behaved the same way, but that was not forthcoming. She said she had nothing to apologize for. It was his fault, and that was really the end of the matter. We've also talked about in the last 5 videos how difficult it is to live in a marriage like that, where for years and many years perhaps you find yourself being willing to own up to the things that you've done wrong and offer apologies, but the other person is willing to, and they deflect, they blame shift, they excuse, they rationalize. They simply aren't going to apologize and ask a husband's forgiveness, or a wife in that case. And how difficult that really is to live in a marriage where you're the only one apologizing. That happens for a long, long period of time. There's a very, very, very good chance that that marriage is really going to fail. But anyway, so we want to turn our attention. The first 6 videos, I should say, were in the attempt to try to help the husband understand why would God have him in that kind of a marriage. What does God want that husband to learn when he's the only one that's apologizing? And how is he to move toward his wife when he finds himself in this kind of a situation where they're having to apologize, or he's having to apologize? How does he address his wife when she's not willing to do that? Now, this is the 7th video, and what we're going to do is turn our attention away from the husband to the wife, who sees that she's done nothing wrong or isn't willing to admit that. And what does God have to say to her that would be helpful to her? What does God want her to learn? How would God address her in this situation? And so, assuming that you're the wife and you're sitting here listening to me, I want to first of all thank you that you're willing to give me just 10 minutes to speak to you about these matters. And if your husband is with you and you're looking at this video together, what I'd like to ask you to do is to ask your husband to leave. Okay, before we get started here, what I'd like to ask you to do is turn to your husband and say, hey, Jeff wants to talk to me alone, so why don't you leave and go do something else and see you in half an hour, or something like that. But I'd like to talk to you about this matter of the quarrel and fight alone, without your husband in the room. Having him in the room might be a distraction, and I'd like to just speak to you directly without him here. That would be very helpful if he's willing to do that. Assuming that he's left and that we're alone, then what I'd like to ask you to do is give me a chance to talk to you about this quarrel and fight. So first of all, let's relive that a little bit more. So this morning there were angry things that were said. There were ways that you acted toward one another that were not kind and loving. And the question that we want to ask ourselves, the question is why did that happen? Why did I behave the way that I did? Why did he behave the way that he did? That's the question that we have to nail this down. This is very important that he understands this, and you as well. In Luke chapter 6, Jesus really addresses this question. Why did he and why did I behave and act and speak the way that I did this morning? And in Luke chapter 6, Jesus says the following. If you have your Bible, I'd like to invite you to turn to that as well. And I'll read to you in chapter 6, verse 43. And if you can follow along with me, we're going to read verse 43, 44, and 45. Here it goes. Luke chapter 6, verse 43. No good tree bears bad fruit, nor does a bad tree bear good fruit. Each tree is recognized by its own fruit. People do not pick figs from thorn bushes or grapes from briars. Very importantly, verse 45. The good man brings good things out of the good stored up in his heart, and the evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored up in his heart, for out of the overflow of his heart, his mouth speaks. So if we were to address the husband, let's do this. Why did your husband say the bad things that he said to you this morning? Well, Jesus says it wasn't because of you. It had only to do and solely to do with what was going on in his own heart. If he had evil things come out of his mouth, then Jesus says the origin of those evil words is an evil heart, his own evil heart. His evil heart was ruled and governed by the sinful nature, then what's going to be coming out of his mouth, the overflow of that sinful heart, are going to be sinful words. But I would say that this would apply to you as well. We could just take his out and put in hers. Out of the overflow of a woman's sinful heart are going to become sinful words. So what Jesus would say to you and would want you to accept this morning from him is, why did you say evil things and bad things and harmful things to him this morning? Jesus would say it wasn't because of him, but rather it was because of what was going on in your heart. Your heart was governed and ruled by the sinful nature, and what came out of your mouth was what was originating in your heart, and that is a sinful nature. And so out of the abundance of that sinful nature heart came those sinful words. Or in other words, it was not because of your husband that you said evil things or acted in sinful ways. It was because of your sinful heart. More importantly, or maybe more clearly, you did not have a good heart. And a good heart is a heart that's ruled by the gospel. A good heart is where the love of God is residing. A good heart is where a person is relying and trusting and depending on the Lord and drawing near to him. If your husband, in the course of that conversation, had been drawing near to the Lord and relying on him and putting his faith in Christ during that event, and if he had been praying and asking God for help and centered, the gospel centered in his heart, what would have come out of that good heart would have been good words toward you and not bad words. Even if you had been bad, if the gospel had been reigning and ruling in his heart, good would have been coming out of his mouth toward you this morning. Similarly, because your heart was not governed by the gospel, you were not intimate with Christ, you were not drawing near to him in prayer, and because of that, had that been happening, by the way, let's look at it this way. Had you been praying, had you been drawing near, had you been thanking him for the gospel and the good things that he had been done, if you'd had a good heart this morning in that conversation, then good would have come out of your lips even in a bad situation. See, your husband can't blame you for the evil things that he said because they originated in an evil heart. Had he had a good heart, then he would have been able to speak to you in good ways. And similarly with you, had you had a good heart, drawing near to God, relying on him, trusting and praying to him, then good would have come out of your lips, even if they were not coming out of your husband's lips this morning. Jesus is helping us here terribly, wonderfully, I should say, terribly, wonderfully, or very dramatically in a great way. He's helping us to clear something up that really, really needs to be cleared up, is why do I behave the way I do, and why do I speak the way that I do? Can't blame it on others, can't defend it, can't excuse it, can't ignore it, can't lie about it, can't blame it on circumstances. Whatever is going on around me, even if it's bad, if I have a good heart, I'll be able to act in a good way and speak in a good way if my heart is good because it's trusting and relying and depending upon Christ and the gospel. I hope that you're willing to accept that as you see that maybe a little bit more clearly now that we've had a chance, you and I, just to look at that together. If you're willing to see that, understand that, and own that, then James, who tells us what causes quarrels and fights among you and who directs us to the heart, what James says that what you should do at this point in time, and what we all need to do in this kind of time as well, is we need to follow his advice in verse 8, where it says, submit to God, draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. And so I would hope that maybe right now, or perhaps in a minute or two when we finish this video, that you would be willing to go to God and say, you know what, God, you're right. I had a bad heart. And the only reason I spoke badly and acted badly, even though my husband was, but that's not why I acted badly and spoke badly. I spoke badly because I was distant from you. I was away from you. I wasn't intimate with you. I was not drawing near to you. And that's why I spoke badly. And I want to ask you to forgive me for being distant from you, not looking to you, drawing near to you, praying to you at that point in time. And I have no one to blame but myself in my absence and walking away from you for speaking badly to my husband and acting badly this morning to him as well. Lord, will you please draw near to me as I'm drawing near to you now and asking for your forgiveness for me and for the way I acted and for the way that I spoke, because I was not drawing near to you and walking in the gospel. You know, man, if you're willing to do that, I know God promises wonderfully that he draws near to you. If you'll draw near to him in confession like that, he'll draw near to you. He'll confirm his love to you, and he'll forgive you for those things as well. If you've done that, then I think it would be very appropriate for you to go out of the room and go down to your husband and say, I've seen something more clearly today. The way I acted was badly this morning. All day in my own mind, I've been blaming you for that. But you know what? I was not trusting Christ. I was distant from him. I was not walking in the gospel. I was not praying. I was not drawing near to the throne of grace. I was doing the opposite. I was acting independently of God. And acting independently of God always ends up badly. And for that reason, I spoke to you in ways that I should not have spoken to you, said things that I should not have said, and acted toward you in ways that I should not have acted. I have no one to blame but myself. And husband, I'm asking you to accept my apology, and I'm asking you to forgive me for the things that I said and the ways that I acted this morning, which were sinful because I wasn't walking with God. Would you please be willing to forgive me? I hope, having seen this more clearly, just you and I this morning, seeing that the quarrel and the fights always originate from the heart, and having a bad heart, that's why you spoke badly this morning, and having reconciled to God, hopefully you're being willing to reconcile with your husband, and hopefully you'll be willing to forgive each other and be reconciled and be at peace with each other. I hope that's helpful to you. I hope it is. I'm confident it is. And I look forward to, in videotape number 8, we're going to conclude this series of videos with one more piece of advice to the madam in this case. So I look forward to talking to you then. Bye-bye.